In this video, we're going to talk about another 2015 Worlds Power Pick, Alistar in the support role. Alistar is one of the oldest champions in the game, part of the original 40, and he has seen competitive play as a top laner, a jungler, a mid laner, and a support. His versatility in his kit, itemization, and way of being played is a thing that has allowed him to really withstand the test of time and make him as relevant now as he was back then. So let's jump right into the strengths of the champion. And obviously he's one of the strongest and most reliable engages in the game. And that's no exception to being able to do that at the level 1. He's one of the best level 1 champions in the game because of the pulverize. Typically when level 1 fights happen, everybody's clumped up in a small tight-knit ball. And Alistar's pulverize can usually hit many members at one time, and that's usually all that is necessary to actually turn the tides of one level 1 fight. So it gives the team with Alistar the advantage of engaging it and disengaging it at their will. He also, once the level 1 is over and regular lanes occur, has one of the most explosive level 2 all-ins in the game. So if the bottom lane with Alistar is able to get level 2 before their opponents, then he can usually put enough pressure to zone the enemy for 2 to 3 creeps, which can create a bit of a farm differential and more importantly a level differential, which can really set things up as the game progresses by giving the team with Alistar the first time to hit level 6. So these are the first guys to hit level 6, and that can really set up very strong tower dives or plays around the map. With that being said, the level 2 gank that he has is one of the most deadly pressure abilities in the game. So during that early stage of the game where there are no real wards, the jungle pressure is pretty much just based on intuition and deduction as to what the enemy thinks the other jungler wants to do, where they started, where their route is, what the opposing jungler is seeing, and from there they kind of deduce, okay, where's the other guy headed, where are they ganking? And for that time, usually laners play a bit more passive because they don't have the vision to warrant such aggressive play. And during that exact window is where Alistar can really shine, because you really have to respect the flash pulverize from Alistar. And by the way, let me rephrase that the actual combo with Alistar is not flash pulverize. That's a very telegraphed ability that can usually be dodged. The real combo is pulverize then flash. So similar to how you input buffer the Lee Sin ultimate, the Dragon's Rage, where you kick and then flash and the kick goes in the opposite direction, it's going to be the same thing on Alistar. So you pulverize, and while the champion is in his animation, you flash, so the animation carries through to the new location and you pulverize there, making a much deadlier combo for setting up any play whatsoever, catching up your opponent off guard, and really setting things up, because what you do is you pulverize, flash, headbutt them, and it's very hard to outplay, especially with the ganking junglers that are very trendy right now, such as Elise or Rek'Sai, that can really just set these ganks up perfectly. That's a very punishing level 2 all-in that really has to be respected. But even if you don't get a 2v2 lane, Alistar is one of the best champions at all aspects of the lane swap. So if you want a tower dive, he's your guy. He's very tanky and has AoE CC to set things up, as well as a little bit of a heal that can really top you off and save teammates from dying in the tower dive. On top of that, if you want to defend the tower dive, Alistar's AoE pulverize and headbutt can really screw somebody up when they're trying to dive by keeping them CC'd under tower for a very long time, even more so if he's packing exhaust. And if you choose to play him in a roaming situation, Alistar's level 2 is one of the best for roams, so his combo is fantastic at setting up roams at any part of the game, at any part of the map. Like in the jungle, in the mid lane, in the top lane, in the bot lane, his combo is excellent roaming, especially when you can do abilities as flashing behind wraith walls and punting somebody behind them. It's really deadly, although keep in mind that the headbutt can be outplayed. You can flash out of it, but it usually comes at no cost, because it's hard to punish the Alistar after you flash out of that. His crowd control, the headbutt, there is no way of avoiding it. You cannot stop that CC. no matter how much tenacity you have, and can be extremely disruptive in fights, especially against champions that have short range and have a difficult time getting in. So for example, if you're in a team fight and you're playing a Corki and you get headbutted out of the team fight, then you're going to be a lot less likely to want to use that Valkyrie to get back into the fight because of how dangerous it is to use your escape ability to jump into the mix of things. So you'll probably just have to walk back into the fight, and that can take a while, and especially to try to get into the range of using auto attack. So his disruption is insane, as well as his ability to really set up ganks. So there's such a reliable crowd control. Now, I believe that QSS or cleanse works for the after effect of pulverize when you actually drop and get stunned. But the knockup part is a fantastic CC. There's nothing you can do about it, and it's great in setting up plays with Yasuo, who's a super popular pick right now, even in the top lane. So Yasuo is a very likely contender to be a highly picked champion in the tournament, and Alistar just really helps him out a lot because Headbutt and Pulverize set his play up, so he's super useful to have in the same combo, as well as being another good tank, which is really what you want with an Alistar composition, somebody to tank and can set up plays for him. He can also we spoke about the flexibility of the champion earlier, and he can also serve very well in compositions that rely a little bit more on poking. So picks like Azirs and Victors and Baruses to an extent can really benefit from having Alistar on the team if you have to deal with people that are trying to dive you, because of how useful the CC that he has. So for instance, an Aurelia, who on the one hand, if you were trying to play Aurelia against somebody like an Annie, a Leona, or a Braum, her passive would usually allow her to get past all that crowd control and jump straight into the carries. Alistar's Headbutt and Pulverize are a lot harder to get past, so it can be super useful, especially in instances where you can actually headbutt people over walls and really just completely isolate them out of the team fight, usually turning the tides of the fights very well. Back to the laning phase for Alistar though, he has the flexibility of skill order that is unbelievably effective. So for instance, if you're in a struggling lane, Alistars can choose to max E first, the healing, and just really stay in lane for as long as they need to while preventing any harass to happen to the AD carry. And maxing the heal can also increase the amount of times that you use your trample, the passive, that tiny little bit of damage, but it can really help with last hitting for your AD carry or pushing the wave. So it can be a really useful ability, especially if you're trying to get into some sort of sieging situation. And because his damage isn't that high, now keep in mind, maxing his Pulverize does do a lot more damage than maxing his heal, so it's no damage to scoff at. It's definitely not necessary with the right team composition and if you need to stay in lane. So maxing heal for the sustain is not a bad idea if necessary. So he can be turned into just a heal bot pretty much, and that's really useful. And that flexibility also spills over into the itemization. So some item builds on Alistar can be rushing the Zeke's Harbinger. So just kind of an engaged champion that can boost the damage of your AD carry or maybe your AP carry. Or you go for a full engaged composition and you have an Ancient Coin, a Righteous Glory, and then like a Dead Man's Play kind of thing. So just a lot of movement speed and just flat out health. So that health is supposed to synergize with your ultimate, making you super tanky once that ultimate is available. But you have to keep in mind, without the ultimate, if your build is purely health, he's very squishy. A bonus as to why people like Alistar is that he fills the role of a tank. So a lot of junglers right now can actually be played in a sort of pseudo carry way, with the exception of Nidalee that can just be a hard carry. You have champions like Nidalee, Elise and Rek'Sai and Evelynn that you can build a lot of damage into and really make them work. And because top laners are now less tanky and more bruisery, it leaves compositions needing a tank. And Braum fills that role very well, but so does Alistar. And that's something that's really desirable and can really just balance out the team composition right from the get-go, which is something that you always want in a team comp, to really have some balance or synergy between the champions. So that's something that always is useful on that champion, on Alistar. Besides that, when he falls behind, he always has a potential of making a comeback play. So his setup and CC is so reliable and can be so explosive that usually no matter what deficit you're in, if you have, say, like an Orianna and an Alistar, even if you're very far behind, you get a one-time wombo combo of a 5-man Pulverize with a 5-man Shockwave, and more often than not, that's a one-team fight regardless of the deficit. So he has a lot of crazy comeback potential and can really turn the tides of a fight. So the fight that I'm trying to remember that really sticks out to me was one way back in, I believe, 2012 in OGN Finals, where it was CLG Europe versus Azubu Frost, and it was game 5, and it was Froggen that played Diana, who was super broken back then, but he had to deal with Mad Life playing Alistar, and oh boy, Alistar just really put the stop on whatever Diana was trying to do with Pulverized, exhaust over wall, exhaust just as soon as she got in, or just being headbutted right back out of walls that would really just slow down the damage that a one carry would do. So he's really strong at shutting down compositions that have kind of diving carries. So Yasuo's, Diana's, or any champion that isn't necessarily long range can really be stopped by Alistar by just keeping him at bay. So it's kind of like trying to get past the bull. Nobody really wants to do that. So it can be really difficult to do that kind of thing versus a champion. And lastly, well, something that I probably should have mentioned earlier is that he snowballs unbelievably hard. If Alistar starts getting roams off, the roams will never stop. Gets mobility boots, gets the distortion cooldown reduction on the flash, and he's going to be making plays left, right, and center. And although the plays are somewhat telegraphed, similar to how an Annie wants to always make a flash play, Annie's is a little bit easier to avoid because of cleanse and because of how squishy she is. She's somebody that you can jump easily. Alistar, on the other hand, is not that. So he's a guy that's very reliable. It's hard to catch him because if you put a lot of resources in trying to catch him, he can always ult, flash, and turn the tide of the fight instantly, which is really powerful to do. So he's a champion that you really want to be careful as to how you approach him, and can put hesitation into the enemy's decisions in engaging. So his counter engage can be super deadly. If you focus a lot on one person and you don't kill them instantly, Alistar can come in a flash and really just counter engage perfectly and disrupt everything. So when he does that, obviously he's an incredibly hard snowballing champion. It's great for that. Now, we've covered quite a bit of weakness of strengths from Alistar, so let's jump right into the weaknesses. And the first one, which is an obvious one that any Alistar player will realize, is that he has high cooldowns. The cooldown of his combo, even though they're very similar with Headbutt and Pulverize, I believe it's almost even the same, they're high cooldown abilities, and if you mess them up, it is devastating. Like, it is horrendous. When you fuck up on Alistar, if you make a combo and there is no follow-up, it's often better that you never existed in the game than you actually made that play. That's how bad fucking up on Alistar can be. So if you make a headbutt Pulverize and it's a 5-man but there's no follow-up, it's useless. You're now stuck in the fight, dealing very minimal damage, healing nobody because you're in the middle of things, and you're tanky but nobody's going to hit you because they don't give a shit about you since you've used all of your abilities. So being super reliant on your teammates isn't necessarily a good thing, but it's something that you have to keep in mind and can be exploited about Alistar. So any Alistar that's usually by themselves with nobody nearby is really a useless champion because of how low his damage is and because of how necessary follow-up for his spells is, or just somebody nearby that can really take advantage of whatever disposition or disruption he's making. So his high cooldowns can really leave him stranded, and it's a high dependence on teammates. It's not somebody like a Thresh that can, a lot of times a Thresh can kind of solo out like a half HP champion, or can really lantern somebody and he's always threatening that somebody's nearby with the length of lantern. Alistar does not have that. So he's really dependent on teamwork, and it's really important that you want to see this kind of play in the coming tournament because these are the best teams in the world. So you want to see them really showcase a high level of teamwork and understanding as to how these champions interact with each other in not just the champion to champion level, but player to player level. His dives are so exceptional, but the problem with the guy is that he can be abused in lane to never even get to that point. So he's not the best pusher. There's other supports that are better at pushing lanes. And what happens with this champion is that he can be abused in lane very heavily before he gets levels. So you need a lot of levels on him if you have to survive lane so you can start maxing your heal. And that's a time where you want to abuse this guy, because a lot of the strengths of Alistar's lane is either in the maxed heal, where he can stay in lane forever, or in the threat of a gank pressure that we spoke about earlier. But if that isn't there, Alistar can really be abused. So for instance, if a team is going to pick a really good synergistic bottom lane with Alistar, so let's go with an example of an Alistar Vayne. Two very popular picks, and they're fantastic at setting up picks. So Vayne will buy a lifesteal, so she'll have a little more sustain, and Alistar can max the heal because Vayne has enough damage more often than not to kill anybody by herself. So this is a really good lane to set things up with. But it can be abused very heavily if the threat of the jungler isn't there for both lanes. So if a team is to see that bottom lane and they respond with a pick like Janna and Ashe, which is a lane that not only outranges both of them, they have AoE, they have CC, and they have disengage and engage post once level 6 comes around. Without junglers being involved, the Janna Ashe lane will permanently push the wave over and over and over while harassing the other guys on their tower, keeping Alistar at bay and really not allowing him to do anything, neither roaming, setting up dives, or even going for a gank. If it's just a 2v2, unless the Janna and Ashe lane were to fuck up, it's very unlikely that they will actually be able to get a kill. So that's a bit of a weakness of the champion, and that's something that a lot of teams really want to try to avoid. And a thing that happens about Alistar that can lead to a lot of mistakes is that if they're put in a situation like the one I just mentioned, is that Alistars can tend to get the feeling that they are immortal or above humanity kind of thing. So because their ultimate makes them so tanky and it's such an oppressive combo, the headbutt pulverize, a lot of Alistars will often wander around by themselves and really get caught out of position. But you have to remember, this champion is actually very squishy. If he's to be by himself and does not have his ultimate, in any fight in the early to mid game, he can be killed very easily and can often be ignored because of the reliance of his teammates. He's very easy to dive as well. So for instance, if you're against that Janna Ashe lane, that Janna Ashe lane can set up dives very well and can usually just ignore whatever Alistar is doing, having one person tank whoever Alistar is comboing, and just focus down that Vayne or whichever other carry. So if there isn't enough setup to kill somebody with the Alistar combo, he will just be kind of giving overconfidence to whoever is nearby him and make them feel safe, which is really far from the reality of it. Those are really the strengths and weaknesses of Alistar, but there's a couple of more points that the champion has that are past the quantification of just being labeled as a strength or a weakness. And those are things like the fact that when you first pick him, which by the way, he's a perfectly fine first pick champion, but a lot of teams don't do that because he's a telltale. So when you pick him, you really tell the team that you want to be fighting often, because he doesn't have that much of reliance on the ultimate, headbutt pulverize and then just back out. He doesn't need the ultimate to really fight that often. Usually the ultimate's more so for team fights, tower dives, or that's about it. Like, he doesn't really need it for skirmishes. It's a huge tell that you want to be fighting a lot around the bot lane, and your strategy is going to revolve around the bottom lane. And even if it doesn't, what that means is that you're going to just be maxing heal and be doing nothing in the bot lane, and you just kind of fake that pick to think that they were going to focus the bottom lane. But the better teams will always put a lot of pressure around bottom lane when they have Alistar, or just try to roam a shitload. And that's really obvious when you see the Alistar pick. So before, the champion used to be a bit higher priority, but as Braum came down, that was a bit more, I guess, reliable. Alistar kind of started dying down, but now teams are picking him up again because of the fantastic synergy that he has with all the other AD carries. So for instance, Vayne, Kalista, Ashe, Tristana can really do work with Alistar. There's so much setup with the CC. You got Vayne, headbutt, pulverize, condemn, loads of damage, and a big burly tank with heal to help her stay in lane. Kalista, fantastic synergy with the ultimate. You got bam, headbutt pulverize combo, tanky, then you pull him back in, then you knock them back up with the Kalista ultimate, and by that time the Alistar combo is back up again, and you've got 2 rounds of crowd control, but you actually hit them 3 times with knockups because of the Kalista ultimate. Crazy synergy, as well as Ashe, so even more of a hard engage composition with a bit of disengage of peel for the Ashe, since she's immobile, can really turn the tides of any deficit because of how hard the engage can be. Arrow into combo, devastating. And lastly, Tristana. So Alistar with Tristana can just push the waves over and over and over, and that's a combination that's a bit better for roaming scenarios as opposed to just staying in the lane, because it really frees up Alistar to do whatever he wants because of the safety that Tristana has on her own, but because of the trample and pulverize thing that can push the lane a little more effectively, because often Tristana does not need a heal max if she's laning with Alistar. Teams that pick Alistar, though, have another telltale, which is that you really want to benefit from the return gank mechanic. So what that means is that if I'm playing, let's say, Elise in the jungle, and I'm going bot lane, and I see that I have an Alistar, what I will want to do is I'm going to try to force a gank into that. It doesn't matter if they have it warded. I'm going to walk straight into that lane, and I'm going to burn my flash. I'm going to flash for the AD carry and flash cocoon, and if I do it right, they're going to have to flash, and that's it. I'll leave it at that, and then I'll just do my thing. And now that AD carry is going to have to play so scared for the entire laning phase, or at least 5 minutes, because of the threat of Alistar being able to flash, pulverize, headbutt. I keep saying flash pulverize. It's a pulverize flash. So being able to just CC that person and kill them instantly with Elise coming back, with myself coming back, it's super oppressive and can really slow down any AD carry, or any lane for that matter. You can do that play in the top lane, in the mid lane, in the jungle, anywhere you can do that, and it creates a huge amount of pressure that frees up Alistar to do whatever he wants. Or if they refuse to acknowledge the fact that they have no flash and Alistar does, you just come right back around and you gank him again. Alistar uses summoners. Sometimes he doesn't even have to because of how long range his combo can be, and then you net yourself a nice little kill. So Alistar is great at setting up ganks, one of the best roamers at that, just unbelievably effective, and his gank without flash is really impossible to avoid, to be honest. So he's super useful, but the problem, as I mentioned again, is that it's very obvious when Alistars want to make plays. Just the fact that he's picked as somebody that you just want to be there over and over and over. But what really interests me about this champion, and why I think he's worthy of a World's Power Pick, is because he is not the flashiest of champions. He's got great combos, but it's very simple. There's no whoa, what a crazy mechanic by Alistar. I can't believe he did that. You know what? He only has one skill shot, relatively easy to hit, but not all the time. It's relatively easy to hit, super effective, but it isn't that exciting to watch. Watching a champion like, say, Anami is a little more exciting. Skill shots are always on the more exciting part of things, and same with it picked like a Thresh or a Janna, that the skill shots can really make a big difference. So he's not that exciting in that, but the way that the team plays around him and the vision, the pressure, is really what makes the Alistar pick work. So he's one of the supports that really relies on a lot more vision and team play around him than most, because of how strong his potential, or the fear of Alistar going for a play or a dive is, that teams really want to create a vision denial and keep Alistar in and out of the brushes. Okay, where is he? Did he leave the lane? Is he up in the lane brush so that he can go for a crazy play right now? Or is he retreating in he's in the far back sides of the brushes, just healing passively and waiting for something to happen? Which, by the way, reminds me, he's actually really hard to gank, because if you try to gank him from behind, a lot of times he can just headbutt whoever's trying to gank him straight into the tower, or it allows him to move himself back and really cover a lot of distance. So you usually have to gank him from the side, or be really good mechanically, or have some crazy champion to really gank him from the back side. And the last point that I want to make is that Sure, he's not a thrilling champion to watch, and seeing an Alistar succeed for me is very exciting. But as a spectator, whether Alistar succeeds or fails, you know when he succeeds, the vision game, the plays, is going to be an amazing thing to watch. But when he fails, it is just, who doesn't love watching Twitch chat after you see an Alistar save somebody with a headbutt? Because of his skill dependence, he can really be putting players on tilt because of the difficulty that his combo can be to execute. Because a lot of times, teams will put themselves in a situation where the only time that an Alistar can engage is if he's popping Ancient Coin, Righteous Glory, and is doing a flash headbutt pulverize. And I don't know about you guys, but if you try to headbutt pulverize an Annie that's hiding amongst a Elixir of Iron Darius and some random ass Elixir of Iron Gragas, you're never gonna click on that target, or it becomes so impossible. It's really high risk and high reward, of course, but it's something that is exciting to watch. And seeing the Alistars that can pull that off just really makes my day. And even if they don't, well, at least I had fun watching that.